31,000 feet above the Baltic coast. The 18th of June, 1943, 14:10 hours local time. The air temperature outside the canopy is minus 45 degrees Celsius. Inside the cockpit of a de Havilland Mosquito PR, Mark 9th, Royal Air Force Flight Lieutenant Maurice Shorty. Longbottom holds his course steady at a true airspeed of over 400 miles per hour. His aircraft, serial number LR412, is a machine built for one purpose: speed. It carries no guns, no bombs, no armor. Its only defense is its ability to fly higher and faster than the enemy fighters that hunt it. Below him, nestled on the island of Usedom, lies the German Army Research Center, Peenemünde. It is one of the most heavily defended and secretive locations in the Third Reich. Lieutenant Longbottom's mission is not to attack it, but to photograph it. As he lines up for his camera run, a jolt shudders through the airframe. The starboard Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, a masterpiece of engineering pushed to its absolute limit, begins to run rough. A thin trail of glycol coolant, invisible at this altitude, begins to stream from a fractured line, the result of a near-perfectly aimed burst of anti-aircraft fire from the ground. The mission and the life of the pilot now depend on a few critical minutes of controlled flight over the target. The film in the cameras is more valuable than the aircraft, more valuable even than the pilot. It holds the first potential proof of a weapon that could change the course of the war. The year is 1943. The strategic tide of the Second World War is turning. In the east, the German Sixth Army has been annihilated at Stalingrad. In the west, the combined bomber offensive is gathering momentum, with the Royal Air Force by night and the United States Eighth Army Air Force by day beginning to systematically dismantle Germany's industrial capacity. Yet, a shadow of profound anxiety hangs over Allied high command. For months, fragmented intelligence reports, whispers from the resistance, and cryptic prisoner-of-war interrogations have spoken of new, terrifying weapons being developed by the Third Reich, Vergeltungswaffen, or vengeance weapons. London, still scarred from the Blitz, is the presumed target. The nature of these weapons is a mystery. The intelligence is contradictory. Some reports speak of giant cannons, others of pilotless aircraft, and the most fantastical describe colossal rockets capable of reaching the stratosphere. The threat is so significant that in April 1943, Duncan Sandys, a cabinet minister and son-in-law of Winston Churchill, is appointed to lead an inquiry. The challenge is immense. How do you fight a weapon you cannot identify, built in a place you cannot find? The answer lies in a revolutionary form of intelligence gathering, photographic reconnaissance. From a quiet country estate at RAF Medmenham, a team of photographic interpreters, or PIs, scrutinize millions of aerial images, searching for clues. They are a new kind of detective, using stereoscopes to turn flat, overlapping photographs into three-dimensional landscapes, measuring objects with pinpoint accuracy, and identifying military hardware from the subtlest of shadows. But the PIs can only analyze the photographs they are given. The task of acquiring them falls to a small, elite group of pilots in the RAF's Photographic Reconnaissance Units, or PRUs. These pilots are a special breed. They fly alone, unarmed, deep into enemy territory. Their missions are a high-wire act of navigation, airmanship, and pure nerve. Their primary aircraft is the de Havilland Mosquito, dubbed the Wooden Wonder. The Mosquito is a design masterpiece, constructed almost entirely of wood to conserve strategic materials. Powered by two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same power plants used in the Spitfire and Lancaster, the photo reconnaissance variants are stripped of all non-essential equipment. No guns, no armor plating, no bomb racks. Everything is sacrificed for speed and altitude. A PR Mosquito can fly at over 400 miles per hour and reach altitudes approaching 40,000 feet, pushing the limits of both engine performance and human endurance. The aircraft is fitted with a suite of high-powered cameras, typically mounted in the belly, pointing straight down or at an oblique angle. The pilot's job is to fly a perfectly straight, level line over the designated target, allowing the cameras to capture a precise sequence of overlapping images. This is far more difficult than it sounds. It requires an extraordinary degree of navigational accuracy and a complete disregard for the instinct of self-preservation. While a fighter pilot can dodge and weave, a PRU pilot must hold his course steady, even as flak bursts blossom around him and enemy fighters claw their way up to meet him. By the summer of 1943, Allied intelligence has narrowed its focus to Peenemünde. The facility is known to be a research center, but its true purpose is hidden. It is defended by one of the heaviest concentrations of anti-aircraft artillery in all of Europe. The Luftwaffe has also stationed its best pilots and newest fighters nearby, specifically to intercept the prying eyes of the PRU. Several attempts to photograph the site have already failed. Some have been turned back by weather, others have been driven off by fighters. At least one Mosquito has simply vanished without a trace. The strategic picture is one of urgency and mounting dread. Every day that passes is another day for the Germans to perfect their secret weapons. The Allied leadership needs proof. They need clear, verifiable imagery that can be used to plan a decisive counterstrike. The weight of this responsibility falls on the shoulders of the pilots of No. 1 PRU, based at RAF Benson in Oxfordshire. They are the tip of the spear in a desperate intelligence war, and the fate of millions may rest on the film contained in their cameras. Flight Lieutenant Maurice Shorty. Longbottom was the archetypal PRU pilot. He was not a fighter ace with a high tally of kills. He was a quiet, meticulous navigator and a supremely skilled pilot whose currency was not enemy aircraft destroyed, but photographic sorties successfully completed. His training was different from that of a fighter or bomber pilot. While all pilots learned basic navigation, PRU aviators had to be masters of the art. Flying alone for hours over vast, often cloud-covered enemy territory, they had to be able to pinpoint a single building or railway junction from 30,000 feet. They were experts in dead reckoning, celestial navigation, and the subtle art of reading the landscape. Their training emphasized precision, discipline, and self-reliance. An error of a single degree in heading could, over the course of a long flight, result in missing the target by miles, rendering the entire mission a failure. Longbottom had honed these skills over dozens of operational sorties. He had joined the RAF before the war and had proven himself to be an aviator of exceptional talent. He was experienced, with hundreds of flight hours in his logbook. He knew the Mosquito intimately, its strengths, its weaknesses, its unique sound and feel. He understood how to coax the maximum performance from its Merlin engines, running them at the fine edge between power and self-destruction. He knew how to manage his fuel with miserly precision, calculating his point of no return with the cold logic of an accountant. A PRU pilot's temperament was as important as his skill. The psychological pressure of flying alone and unarmed was immense. The solitude, the constant vigilance, the knowledge that there was no one to help if things went wrong, could break a man. Longbottom possessed the calm, almost detached demeanor that was a hallmark of the unit. He was able to compartmentalize fear, to focus entirely on the procedural execution of the mission. His instructors would have noted his steady hand, his methodical approach to checklists, and his ability to remain unruffled in the face of emergencies. These were not the flashy attributes of a fighter ace, but they were the essential qualities for survival and success in the world of photographic reconnaissance. He had flown missions over the naval bases at Kiel and Wilhelmshaven, over the industrial heart of the Ruhr, and over the U-boat pens on the French coast. He had been chased by Focke-Wulf 90s, bracketed by flak, and had navigated home on a single engine more than once. Each successful mission was a quiet victory, a confirmation of his skill and a contribution to the vast, invisible war of intelligence. On the morning of the 18th of June 1943, the briefing at RAF Benson was tense. The target was Peenemünde. The objective was to secure definitive imagery of the entire facility. The meteorologists predicted a brief window of clear weather over the target area. Longbottom was assigned the mission. He would have gone through the familiar pre-flight rituals with meticulous care, studying the maps, plotting his course, calculating fuel requirements, and personally inspecting his aircraft. He would have spoken with the camera technicians, ensuring the film magazines were properly loaded and the lenses were clean. As he climbed into the cockpit of Mosquito LR-41T, he was a man at the peak of his professional abilities, about to undertake the most critical mission of his career. The flight would be long, dangerous, and he would be entirely on his own. The takeoff from RAF Benson was smooth. Longbottom climbed the Mosquito in a wide, sweeping spiral, gaining altitude as he headed east toward the coast. The aircraft was light and responsive, its tanks full, its Merlin engines humming in perfect synchronicity. He crossed the English coast and set course over the cold gray expanse of the North Sea, continuing his climb. The operational procedure for a deep penetration mission was to climb continuously toward the target. Altitude was life. The higher he was, the more time he had to react to intercepting fighters, and the harder he was to hit for the flak batteries below. The cockpit was pressurized, but the system was rudimentary. He was on oxygen, the mask cold against his face. His world was the green glow of the instrument panel, the crackle of the radio, and the vast empty sky outside the canopy. He leveled off at his planned altitude of 31,000 feet. The curvature of the Earth was visible on the horizon. His navigation was precise, a constant cross-reference of his compass, his airspeed indicator, and his watch. After nearly 2 hours of flight, he made landfall over Denmark and adjusted his course for the final run-in to the Baltic coast. The tension in the cockpit would have been palpable. This was the most dangerous phase of the mission. He was now within range of German radar. He knew that fighter squadrons would be scrambled, their controllers guiding them toward his position. His eyes were constantly scanning the sky, looking for the telltale black dots that would signal an interception. As he approached the island of Usedom, he could see his target ahead, the sprawling complex of Peenemünde. He began his final pre-run checks, switching on the cameras and ensuring the heating elements were working to prevent the lenses from freezing over. He trimmed the aircraft for perfectly stable, hands-off flight. The next few minutes required absolute precision. He had to fly a straight, unwavering line, allowing the F-52 cameras in the belly of the Mosquito to capture the sequence of overlapping images that the interpreters at Medmenham needed. It was at this moment, just as he committed to the camera run, that the flak batteries on the ground opened up. The sky around him was suddenly filled with black puffs of smoke, each one marking a shell burst. The German gunners were good. They were using radar-guided predictors, and their shells were reaching his altitude. Longbottom held his course. He could not deviate. To jink or turn would ruin the photographic sequence. An instant later, a percussive jolt ran through the airframe. It was not a direct hit, but a near miss. A shell had exploded close enough for a fragment of shrapnel to pierce the engine cowling of the starboard Merlin. The damage was not immediately catastrophic. No fire, no explosion. But on the instrument panel, the needles began to tell a story of impending failure. The coolant temperature for the starboard engine began to rise, and the oil pressure started to fall. Longbottom knew what this meant. He had a coolant leak. Without coolant, the engine would overheat and eventually seize. He had a choice to make. He could abandon the run, turn for home, and hope to make it back on one engine. Or he could finish the job. He had come this far. The target was laid out below him. He held his course. For 2 agonizing minutes he flew straight and level through the heart of the flak barrage, the Mosquito shuddering with near misses. The starboard engine was now running rough, vibrating heavily. The temperature gauge was climbing past the red line. He kept the aircraft steady, his grip tight on the control yoke, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He felt the subtle change in the airframe as the last camera exposure was made. The run was complete. Now, survival was the priority. He immediately banked the Mosquito away from the target and pushed the nose down, trading altitude for speed. He feathered the propeller of the dying starboard engine, shutting it down to reduce drag. The Mosquito was now flying on a single engine, a lopsided, asymmetric configuration that required constant rudder input to keep it flying straight. He was deep inside enemy territory, losing altitude and leaking vital fluids. The long, lonely journey home had begun. He transmitted a brief, coded message to Benson, informing them of his status. Then he focused on the task at hand. He had to navigate a new course, avoiding known flak concentrations and fighter bases. He was now more vulnerable than ever. A single-engine Mosquito was slower and less maneuverable, a tempting target for any Luftwaffe patrol. He descended to a lower altitude, hoping to use cloud cover to mask his escape. The remaining Merlin engine was under immense strain, running at maximum continuous power. He monitored its gauges with an eagle eye, praying it would hold together. The flight back across the North Sea was a race against his fuel gauge and the setting sun. Every minute felt like an hour. The cockpit grew cold as he descended. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he saw the familiar coastline of England appear through the haze. He had made it. He contacted RAF Benson, declared an emergency, and was given a straight-in approach. The landing was a masterpiece of airmanship. Bringing in a damaged, single-engine Mosquito required a delicate touch. He managed the approach perfectly, touching down on the main runway and rolling to a safe stop. The mission was over. As the Mosquito's single working engine spooled down, the silence on the runway at RAF Benson was punctuated by the wail of approaching emergency vehicles. The fire crews and ambulance were a standard precaution for any emergency landing. But as they got closer, the extent of the damage to LR-412 became clear. The starboard engine cowling was peppered with shrapnel holes, and dark streaks of oil and glycol coolant stained the fuselage. The ground crew, who viewed the pilots with a mixture of awe and professional concern, knew it had been a close-run thing. But their first priority was not the pilot or even the aircraft. It was the film. Before Flight Lieutenant Longbottom had even unstrapped from his parachute, a specialized vehicle screeched to a halt beside the Mosquito. Technicians carefully opened the camera bay, removed the heavy film magazines, and placed them in secure containers. They were immediately dispatched by a high-speed car to RAF Peenemünde, a journey of less than an hour. Longbottom, meanwhile, was helped from the cockpit, exhausted but unharmed. The physical and mental strain of the last few hours had been immense. He would have been taken for a medical check and then to the debriefing room. There, over a cup of strong tea, he would have recounted the mission in precise, dispassionate detail to the intelligence officer. He would have described his course, the altitudes flown, the flak opposition, the moment of the hit, and the long, arduous flight home. His report would be cross-referenced with the aircraft's maintenance logs and his own flight plan to build a complete picture of the sortie. While Longbottom was being debriefed, the real drama was unfolding at Peenemünde. The film was developed with the utmost urgency. Within hours, the wet negatives were being examined by the eager photographic interpreters. What they saw on the illuminated tables confirmed their worst fears, but also provided the breakthrough they had been desperately seeking. The overlapping prints were placed under stereoscopes, and the bland, two-dimensional landscape of Peenemünde sprang into three-dimensional life. And there, unmistakable, were the rockets. The PIs identified large, torpedo-shaped objects on railway flat cars and on transport cradles. They measured them with painstaking accuracy. They were approximately 46 feet long. They also identified curious, circular earthwork embankments and large, vertically oriented structures that could only be test stands and launching equipment. For the first time, all the fragmented reports made sense. This was the V-2 rocket, a weapon far beyond anything the Allies possessed. One of the key figures in this discovery was a young PI named Constance Babington Smith. It was she who first spotted one of the rockets and, working with her colleagues, confirmed its significance. Her meticulous analysis of Longbottom's photographs provided the smoking gun. The discovery was immediately relayed up the chain of command, reaching Churchill's war cabinet within hours. The official report, citing the imagery from Sortie Y-83 flown by FLMS Longbottom, left no room for doubt. The V-weapon threat was real, and its source had been located. The verification was absolute. The photographs were hard, undeniable evidence. They were cross-referenced with a previous, less clear, sortie flown by another pilot, and the pieces fit perfectly. The intelligence puzzle was solved. Longbottom's skill and courage had provided the key. He would be awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for this and other missions, a high honor recognizing acts of valor and courage in the face of the enemy. The citation would praise his great skill and determination. For the quiet, professional pilot, it was validation of a job well done, but the true impact of his flight was only just beginning to be felt. The photographs taken by Flight Lieutenant Longbottom on June 18, 1943, acted as a catalyst. The undeniable proof of the V-2 rocket program triggered an immediate and decisive Allied response. Within days, the British War Cabinet, armed with the detailed intelligence from Medmenham, authorized a massive bombing raid on Peenemünde. The operation was codenamed Hydra. The objective was to disrupt the research and development of the V-weapons and, if possible, to kill the German scientists and technicians working on the project. On the night of August the 17th, just 2 months after Longbottom's flight, a force of nearly 600 RAF heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Stirlings took off from bases across England. It was a complex and daring raid. The bombers attacked in 3 waves, targeting the scientists' living quarters, the V-2 production workshops, and the experimental facilities. The raid was costly. The RAF lost 40 bombers and their crews, a heavy price to pay. But the impact on the V-weapon program was significant. While the raid did not halt the program entirely, it caused severe damage and disruption. It killed a number of key personnel, including Dr. Walter Thiel, the head of engine development. More importantly, it forced the Germans to disperse their production and testing facilities, moving them to more secure, often underground, locations. This dispersal delayed the operational deployment of the V-2 by several critical months. Those months were a gift of time that the Allies put to good use, preparing for the D-Day landings and developing their own countermeasures. Longbottom's sortie had a profound tactical impact on the conduct of the intelligence war. It was the ultimate validation of the high-risk, high-reward strategy of photographic reconnaissance. It proved that a single, successful unarmed sortie could have a greater strategic effect than a major bombing raid. It cemented the role of the PRU as an indispensable tool of Allied command. The demand for photographic intelligence soared. More resources were allocated to the PRUs, and their mission portfolio expanded. The lessons learned from the Peenemünde mission, the need for speed, altitude, and surprise, influenced the design and tactics of future reconnaissance aircraft. The success of the mission also highlighted the critical synergy between the pilots who took the pictures and the interpreters who analyzed them. The pilots were not just flying, they were aiming a camera lens with their entire aircraft. The interpreters were not just looking at photos, they were deconstructing the enemy's most secret plans. This partnership between aerial photography and intelligence analysis became a cornerstone of modern warfare, a legacy that continues to this day in the form of satellite and drone reconnaissance. Longbottom's photographs are now a permanent part of the historical record, preserved in archives like the National Collection of Aerial Photography in the UK. They are studied by historians as a textbook example of a pivotal intelligence breakthrough. What survived from that day are the records, the grainy black and white images, and the story of a single pilot who flew through the heart of the enemy's defenses and brought back the truth. The coastline of the Baltic Sea is quiet now. The island of Usedom is a holiday destination, its beaches dotted with resorts. The concrete and steel ruins of the Peenemünde Research Center are still there, a museum and a memorial, silent witnesses to a technological arms race that took place over 80 years ago. The sky above is empty of bombers and flak bursts. It is just sky. The war is gone. The Mosquito, the wooden wonder, exists only in museums and at air shows, a beautiful and deadly artifact from a different era. What endures is the story, a single thread in the vast tapestry of the Second World War. It is a story not about the clash of armies, but about the quiet, procedural work of finding a single, vital piece of information. It reveals that warfare is not always about brute force. It is also about knowledge. The courage of Flight Lieutenant Longbottom was not that of a warrior charging into battle, but that of a professional executing a precise and dangerous task with unflinching competence. His flight was a mathematical equation, a careful balance of risk, fuel, altitude, and time. He did not defeat the enemy with guns, but with a camera lens. He was part of a chain that linked a decision in London to a photograph taken at 30,000 feet, which in turn led to a bombing raid that may well have altered the timeline of the war. Maurice Longbottom would survive the war, a quiet hero of an invisible conflict. He, like so many of his generation, returned to civilian life, the immense pressures and dangers of his wartime service, a private memory. The event reminds us that history often turns on such small hinges: a single flight, a roll of film, a moment of decision in a lonely cockpit miles above the earth. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as we do, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel, WW2 Aviation Historian. We have many more stories like this to share. We'd also love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Thank you for joining us.